Welcome back, community, to another Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita podcast. I am your host, Dr. Anita Polite Wilson, C-Suite Trusted Advisor, Board Director, and Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Consultant, helping members of the C-Suite and their teams reframe diversity conversations from difficult to different. We are back with Dr. Aaron Day, producer of Good Day LA on Fox 11 KTTV, and he's with us talking about the Juneteenth celebration. Dr. Day, welcome back.
Hello, hello. I'm good to be back.
I hate that it's our last conversation, but I think it's probably going to be our most consequential one because in our very first conversation, you mentioned the fact that education around Juneteenth is
Yeah.
really important. And I did my research, obviously, and I found an article. It's titled Juneteenth, The Complicated History, Significance, and Celebration Around the Struggle for Freedom. Community, there is not an author cited, but the paper was put forth by the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg campus. And it talks about the fact that Juneteenth was neither the beginning nor the end of something. The end of the Civil War and the ending of slavery didn't happen overnight. And it was a lot more like a jagged edge than a clean cut. And the article goes on to talk about the fact that while blacks were freed, it took a while for folks in Texas to get that news. So while other blacks across the country were freed, blacks in Texas were not. That, I believe, is in reference to the jagged edge, where it wasn't a clean break, where all of Black America was free. And Dr. Day, tell us about the education about emancipation and Juneteenth that you're aware of.
Look, I'll be very honest with folks. I was not made aware of Juneteenth. I was not taught about it in schools growing up, um, elementary, middle, or high school. Juneteenth was not emphasized. It wasn't until probably college or even after college that Juneteenth really became something that I learned about. And even then, it was bits and pieces, right? It was mentioned here and there. Maybe the news mentioned it, but that didn't really happen. So my understanding of Juneteenth is very, very, very basic, right? It marks the annual end of uh, end of slavery, right? Which wasn't in 1776, as we know. I know about the celebrations. I know um, that the proclamation in 1862. Um, I know about the Army General and arriving in Galveston, and then arriving that thousands of people who were enslaved be set free. So again, I mean, that is, I guess you could say, my understanding is just common knowledge.
Mhm.
I'm not a historian. I haven't read books about it. I just know what's on the surface.
Mhm. And that's fair to say that you're not a historian. This is not necessarily your subject matter expertise. I appreciate that. I, like you, have been finding out more and more every year. On that day in Galveston, 250,000
Yeah,
Black
250. Yep.
folks realized that they were free. So I appreciate your candor because for some reason we seem to think that everybody Black knows everything there is to know about everybody Black, and that's not always the case, people, any more than it is everybody white knows everything about everybody white. That's just not how it works. And life is an educational journey. So you've told us that a lot of what you know about Juneteenth was not learned in school. Now, as an adult, how do you feel about that? Do you feel, hey, that's part of American history too? Do you feel like, well, they didn't know? Do you feel cheated? I mean, what does adult Dr. Day say to his, 10-year-old self, not knowing what he knows now?
Well, I mean, I wish I was taught that. I mean, I wish I was taught more about Juneteenth and what happened that day, and what happened prior and what led up to it. Um, yeah, I mean, sure, I definitely. Am I angry? I wouldn't say I'm angry about it, but I do think that um, I was cut short of some really important information
Mhm.
that was already available. Right, it was already there. So why wasn't it shared? Why wasn't it taught? Um, so and I it may be taught now. I'm not sure how many schools are teaching it, but for me, I just wish I had learned more.
Yeah, that's a good point. Not knowing whether it's taught or how it's taught now. I know that when I was in high school, there was an African American Studies class. My instructor was Mr. Ed Jenkins. Mr. Ed Jenkins was something else, and he knew everything about everything when it came to Black history. And I appreciated that foundation that I got. Had it not been for Mr. Jenkins, I probably wouldn't have known anything about Marcus Garvey. I wouldn't have known anything about W. You know what? Let me not say that, because my mother did have an African American encyclopedia. So we did grow up knowing these things as kids, but it was reinforced in high school. And after high school, um, unless I was searching for something for a reason, you just didn't hear much about it. Do you have any idea if that's still the case in school?
I do not know. Look, I have a daughter who's 16. I have my oldest is 19. My youngest is 7. Um, I can't recall any of them discussing a Juneteenth assignment
Mm-hmm.
or a Juneteenth event at their school. I don't recall any of that. Um, I mean, I took Black Studies in college, a couple of courses. So, again, I think my exposure started there. And, unfortunately, I think it may start in college for most people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just don't know if the earlier years are going to be exposed to that.
So let's switch gears for a minute. Now that we've got your daddy role out there, you mentioned that a lot of us may not find out about it until college, and even then, it's an elective. It's not something that
Right.
we feel is necessary as a part of American history.
Mhm.
So, with your children not having any Juneteenth assignments, how do you feel about that?
Again, same way I felt when I learned that I wasn't taught that in my school. I think it's not okay. I think they should be taught Juneteenth. I think they should have lesson plans for Juneteenth. Um, but you know what? The school system is not perfect. There's a lot of things that I don't expect them to teach them, and it
Mhm.
falls on me and the rest of our family to teach them that. So, look, I just try to fill in the gaps. Um, so if we go to Lamert Park or if we go to Riverside this year, it's important that I make sure that they understand why we're going and what happened that day.
I think that this has been a valuable exploratory conversation.
Mhm.
And I think it's been important for folks to understand that, again, we're not trying to pit one holiday against the other. We're just looking at the two perspectives
Mhm.
from the lens of a Black woman and a Black male in America who were not necessarily raised to celebrate Juneteenth as heavily as everyone is raised to celebrate July 4th, and just kind of looking at why that is and how can we make it different. How can we bring about conversations about the historical implications and importance of Juneteenth, not just for Black folks, but for everyone in America? How can we help to cultivate that sense of pride in this part of our history, the way people have pride in July 4th? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying celebrating slavery, I'm saying celebrating freedom from slavery.
Mhm.
Why can't we celebrate freedom from slavery with as much exuberance as we celebrate freedom from British rule? Why is that, and how can we get there? So, community, that's really what this conversation is about. Dr. Day, what final words do you want to share with us?
Look, I think there's a big difference between recognizing a holiday and celebrating a holiday.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think you can still recognize 4th of July without necessarily celebrating the 4th of July.
Mm-hmm.
You can do both as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Same goes for Juneteenth. Maybe those who don't understand the holiday can just begin by recognizing the holiday. And all that is just acknowledging that something happened that day that was really important. You don't have to go to a big park or, no one's asked you to go march or dance, but just simply recognition to me, could be the first step.
I agree. And that might start with everyone in corporate America honoring the day by making it a holiday, just like we do July 4th.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Dr. Day, thank you so much for joining me. It
You're
has
welcome.
been a delightful conversation. Again, community, not to be inflammatory, but to encourage an exploratory dialogue around Juneteenth and its significance and making it just as important as July 4th, one of these days. If this conversation, this real conversation from the C-suite, has inspired you at all, please get in the flow, follow, like, overshare anything with your community that helps you reframe diversity conversations from difficult to different. Until next time, this is Dr. Anita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real.